Good morning and welcome back to Venture Daily. On today's show, OpenAI is racing to build a 5 gigawatt AI infrastructure empire with Oracle, costing $30 billion a year and creating enough juice to power 4 million homes.
While Stargate, its $500 billion SoftBank partnership, is lagging behind. I'm Josiah Simons.
I'm Jackson Fordyce. It's Wednesday, July 23rd. Let's get you smarter today. Six months ago, OpenAI and SoftBank announced a $500 billion venture called Stargate at the White House, promising to transform US AI infrastructure.
Today, the project has yet to secure a single data center deal and is now targeting a much more realistic goal of building one somewhat smaller data center by the end of the year. People familiar say it's likely to be in Ohio.
So why the delays? Well, partial blame could lie with the tensions that have grown between OpenAI and SoftBank over key decisions like site locations and project control, while both companies pledged to invest $100 billion immediately. 6 months ago, progress has stalled, and no binding infrastructure agreements have been finalized.
Meanwhile, Sam Altman, OpenAI's CEO, has forged ahead independently, signing multi-billion-dollar data center deals with Oracle and CoreWeave without SoftBank's involvement. The Oracle deal alone will cost OpenAI $30 billion a year and deliver 4.5 gigawatts of computing power, enough to power 4 million homes.
Altman has even been using the Stargate name for projects not backed by SoftBank, despite SoftBank holding the trademark according to public filings. For example, OpenAI has labeled data centers in Abilene and Denton, Texas as part of Stargate.
And on screen there is the Abilene site. It's really coming together. I think there's only one of the kind of 4 blocked building that we saw a couple months ago. So they're starting to really expand. Yeah. Despite the friction, both companies maintain publicly that the partnership is still intact and progressing, with a shared target of building 10 gigawatts of data centers, just like they had announced back in the White House.
SoftBank's Masayoshi Son remains bullish on OpenAI and sees Stargate as his chance to finally secure a leading role in AI after years of missed bets.
However, disagreements over infrastructure partners, branding rights, and project government have complicated the joint effort.
All right, so for more on this story, I called an old friend of the show. Put your hands together for Jake O'Shea. Talk to them.
My name is Jake O'Shea. I'm a principal at Antler here in Austin, Texas. We're a global pre-seed firm writing $500,000 checks as the first investor into really exciting companies.
All right, for my first question for Jake, 6 months after the $500 billion Stargate launch at the White House, the project hasn't closed a single deal. What does that signal to you about the challenges of scaling AI infrastructure, even with major players like OpenAI and SoftBank involved?
There's a few dynamics that this highlights for building out AI infrastructure. The reason Texas is a landing spot for a lot of these projects is that Texas has a lot of open space. But having open space and even having the capital to develop and build a center in that space is not enough, because at the end of the day, you need to connect to power sources. And there's 2 kind of big problems that are holding back our energy system in the US, scaling these types of AI infrastructure projects more broadly. And the first is that we just don't have enough power. A lot of these systems, I think this first one that OpenAI is building in Abilene is like 10 gigawatts. It's the equivalent of 2 full Hoover dams worth of power. It's just a huge capacity of energy that currently we don't have enough production for available on the grid. And that kind of brings me to the second problem, which is that the grid itself is not developed enough to be able to connect to these different power projects. I've been looking at a lot of companies and talking to a lot of folks in the data center space, and there's a wait time of, a year and a half at a minimum, usually 2.5 to 3 years, just to connect to the energy grid. And when you think about it from the, utility perspective, companies like ERCOT, who manages the grid here in Texas, they need to balance the needs of these new development projects with the needs of humans and cities. And right now, there's just not a lot of infrastructure in place to make sure that if this new data center comes online, that will have enough power to go around, that they'll be able to allocate enough of the power production in the state to actually go to power these centers. So bunch of different influences kind of combining here to make it not as straightforward as just find land, build a data center, and then fill it with server racks, but a lot more complexity around getting power to that data center and making sure that it's distributed in a way that doesn't take power away from us kind of running power in our homes.
Yeah, super interesting there from Jake. Great insights.
Yeah.
I did want to say a quick correction. Jake mentioned that the OpenAI data center in Abilene would produce 10 gigawatts. I think he just misspoke there.
Yeah.
He's quite likely confusing two things. So the entire $500 billion Stargate plan aims to produce 10 gigawatts of compute capacity total across all sites. The $11.6 billion Abilene site is expected to produce 1.2 gigawatts of compute capacity. Still unbelievably large, right? But wanted to clarify that. And for context on how much compute that is, 1.2. I think Jake used the example of the Hoover Dam, double that. That's a little off. So the Hoover Dam can produce up to about 2.1 gigawatts, meaning the Abilene site will produce a little over half of what the Hoover Dam does. But what he was referring to was that deal that OpenAI have with Oracle, which is the $30 billion every year deal.
Yes.
That's going to produce 4.5 gigawatts of data center sites, probably across America.
That's the two Hoover Dam one.
Exactly. That is equivalent to 2 Hoover Dams.
Okay,
So
I see.
Just some clarification there.
A helpful context there. Altman has pushed ahead with massive separate data center deals while Stargate stalls. So I asked Jake, do you think this kind of parallel deal making undermines joint ventures, or is it just the reality of moving fast in AI?
Yeah, good question. I think that OpenAI and all the big players in foundational models need more compute. They need more compute to train better models. They need more compute to run existing models. And so they're going to do whatever it takes to get that up and running. Obviously, Stargate is a really exciting initiative because you've got backing from the federal government. You've got tons of direct foreign investment coming in to power that. But given a lot of the hiccups and the stalls that are happening with developing the specific Stargate projects, OpenAI needs more compute. And so they're going to have to find other options to get that other compute, including making deals on the side outside of the current Stargate initiative.
I also asked Jake, OpenAI and SoftBank pledged a $500 billion partnership, but seemed to be clashing over key decisions from site locations to project control. How do you interpret the dynamic between these two giants?
Yeah, another good question. I think there might be an element of too many cooks in the kitchen here. What I mean by that is SoftBank, obviously a massive fund, they own energy production facilities as well. And I think baked into the deal, they want to allocate some of the power that they use to power these centers from that company itself. And so that obviously creates kind of roadblocks and bureaucracies to navigate in terms of getting that plugged in and up and running. It just adds additional complexity and takes it away from being like a purely free market kind of capitalist decision and kind of steers OpenAI in a specific direction for these types of projects. So that's a dynamic that is probably playing some part of these decisions.
Okay, so if you're confused, like what is Stargate? What are they talking about? Because they got 500 billion they're throwing around. Then you've got this $30 billion with Oracle.
Yeah,
they're both saying Stargate is stalling, but at the same time, Altman has got all these projects. So
it's confusing.
It is confusing. I want to hopefully clarify some of that of what we're actually talking about here. So we mentioned this separate data center deal OpenAI just announced with Oracle. Okay. Let's dig into that. The companies are planning to build 4.5 gigawatts, as we mentioned, of new U.S. data centers, but it's under the name Stargate. So that's why it's kind of confusing because Altman is basically taking the name Stargate and just kind of attaching it to all of his new data center projects, even though SoftBank is not actually officially a part of these new projects.
Because Stargate was originally just OpenAI and SoftBank, correct?
Yes. If it was a data center built with their partnership together, then it would officially be a Stargate project. That's part of the $500 billion that was announced at the White House.
Right. So now that they have this deal with Oracle, but not having SoftBank involved, it's still named Stargate?
Yeah, at least according to Altman, he's calling it Stargate, but it officially would probably not be Stargate as it relates to the 500 billion that is the original Stargate plan. That's why we're saying that's stalling. They haven't actually set one data center up yet. The first one coming in Ohio, all that kind of stuff. That's true. While at the same time, there are these Stargate like infrastructure centers going down because Sam Altman's just kind of co-opting the name and just calling them all Stargate.
Yeah, so Stargate is accelerating and over-exceeding big time, or it's struggling to get off the ground, depending how you look at it?
Exactly, yeah. So if you want to look at it from the perspective of anything with the name Sam Altman or OpenAI on it that is a data center, and if you call that Stargate, then they're doing great.
You're probably right.
They're ahead of schedule.
Yeah.
But if you wanted to look at it as anything that Stargate has the name with SoftBank attached to it, which is officially the actual
they have the trademark,
formal,
right?
They have the trademark. Then you would say, oh, they're really stalling and they haven't put any, shovels in the ground. Just kind of a matter of perspective on that.
I see. For my last question for Jake, OpenAI's deal with Oracle reportedly costs $30 billion a year, triple its annual revenue. How should founders and investors think about these outsized infrastructure bets before the business model of AI even stabilizes?
AI today feels very much like a gold rush, right? Clearly, there's a ton of value that's being generated. Some of that hasn't translated directly to enterprise companies and their bottom line, but it's clear that there's a huge opportunity here. And I think every company is just moving as fast as possible to capitalize on it. For a company like OpenAI, they're not capital constrained, right? They have a long list of investors just waiting to put money into that company just to participate and be part of what is one of the market leaders in this kind of foundational model AI LLM space. And so for them, if they need compute in order to be competitive, remain competitive, and kind of keep that pole position in the market, they're going to be willing to spend whatever it takes to get there, even if that's 3x their current annual revenue. And the capital markets are willing to give it to them because they've executed so well thus far. So I don't know that I have a strong opinion on how this is all going to shake out, but it's very clear that money is not the blocker for developing these new infrastructure projects, and money is going to continue pouring into them for the near future until we have more definitive answers on where the real value is going to lie in this new technology.
Yeah, I mean, $30 billion a year makes sense. Like, yeah, money is no issue here.
It's insane.
Yeah.
Thank you to Jake O'Shea for being on the show today.
All right, everyone, that's it for Venture Daily today. First of all, just thank you so much for watching. But please, if you liked the show today, hit that like button. Go down and subscribe to our channel. We do this every single day, Monday through Friday, and we really help. It really helps the show when you support us, and we really appreciate that.
Absolutely. And thank you to Content Stack for letting us film here every single day in Austin, Texas at the Content Stack Experience Center. Like Josiah said, if you like today's show, whether on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, or X, leave us a like, a comment, and a review. Throw us a 5-star rating if you think we earned it. And as always, we'll see you here tomorrow morning at Venture Daily.